We're joined, though, by our Wednesday regulars on Breaking Politics, and for a change, they're in the studio, live and in person. Joel Fitzgibbon, nice to see you in. Joshua Frydenberg, welcome in.
Thanks, Tim.
Some broad response first to the budget in a short space of time. Joel,
well, it's been a very jovial mood here in the studio before we've come on camera. So
it has.
It must have been a good budget.
It must have been. Josh?
It was a shocker. I mean, last year Wayne Swan. Last year, let's call a spade. Last year Wayne Swan got up before the Parliament to deliver the budget. He said, "Tonight I'm announcing 4 years of surpluses." Well, those surpluses have never eventuated. We're being told that they'll arrive in 2016. The Labor government has delivered 12 consecutive deficits. So it was more deficit, more debt, more taxes, more spending, and actually lower growth and higher unemployment.
Look, no doubt the Treasurer went out way too far on his surplus promise. Everybody knows that. But he did do it on the back of the forecasts that he had at the time, which were done by the same Treasury forecasters you'll be using if you win government.
Well, actually, the Australian dollar forecast they actually got right. But, the point is they've had a mining tax, which they said would deliver tens of billions of dollars of revenue, which has so far only delivered $200 million. And the year that they're promising a surplus out in the Never Never, they're saying they will produce 10 times that in revenue, $2 billion. So I don't believe the government's promises. You've got a carbon tax, which instead of growing the economy, is actually shrinking the economy because it's a disincentive to investment.
Joel Fitzgibbon, there is a believability problem here, isn't there? Even if it might have been partly Treasury's mistakes, there is a real believability problem.
Look, Tim, I knew I'd gain from letting Josh go first. There was a tactic. You hear that?
You just didn't want to defend the budget.
Labor's now delivered 12 budget deficits, he says. Now, I know how he gets that figure, but people recognise spin when they see it. People are sick and tired of the spin. As you acknowledge yourself, we rely on the same forecasters within Treasury as Tony Abbott would if he were Prime Minister today. They don't always get it exactly right. We set down last night a responsible budget, a budget with a responsible path back to surplus, not the sledgehammer approach, which would be devastating for the economy in a very fragile global environment. We're putting jobs first. We've put in place some very, very important reforms. We could have had a budget surplus and given up on school reform, given up on the disability care arrangements, etc. We chose not to do that. It's a good budget for the country, and I think it will be well received in the broader community. And
surely now we're at the stage where treasurers going forward will not promise surpluses. They'll promise to do their best given the economic circumstances they're handled, because Wayne Swan has been...
Well, we can actually promise surpluses when we're going to deliver them, because we delivered 10
Well, you haven't given us a year, though, Josh. I mean, we're still waiting on the when on the...
Sure, because we actually need, Tim, and to be fair, we need to see the pre-election fiscal outlook, which won't be until the start of the campaign.
He comes to be qualified.
But because the truth is, you guys promised, from the Prime Minister to your Treasurer to your Finance Minister, more than 500 times that you deliver a surplus, and you never did. Even now you've got carbon tax projections which are 3 times the current carbon price in Europe. So we just can't believe you. You can't manage a budget. You've got to face reality, Joel.
Tim, Josh would have us believe the global financial crisis never occurred. The biggest economic global downturn since the Great Depression.
Well,
this does upset the course of things economically, and it does have a big impact on the budget. And again, this is a responsible budget. I mean, John Howard had rivers of gold and a very, very strong global economy, and yes, was able to produce surpluses over a period of time. I think if the government ever got one thing wrong, it was overstating the need for surpluses, this almost obsession.
The 500 promises, in a way.
Well, the punters out there aren't obsessed about surpluses, but they're pretty savvy. They understand the budget more than people give them credit for. It's not unlike the family budget. They know there are times when you go into deficit to fund the country's need, as long as you have a medium to long-term strategy of returning back to surplus. People understand this, and that's exactly what the Treasurer did last night.
So it was a mistake in past years to put too much emphasis on getting back into the black.
I think politics is about expectations management, and it's always been my approach to under-promise and over-deliver.
And Wayne Swan over-promised.
Well, I think we spent a lot of time overstating the importance of returning to surplus. I don't think the punters ever had an obsession with it, and I don't think we should have spent so much time talking about it, as Josh still wants to do. I mean, Josh should be pretty careful about raising expectations of surpluses.
But you're admitting now that Wayne spent too long.
His government, his party is ever re-elected to government. But I think people accept budget deficits as long as it's not structural and it's not permanent.
And in fairness to Josh, I saw him nodding there. You think the surplus was overpromised, clearly.
Absolutely.
But that is clearly a danger for a Liberal government going forward.
Well, we're going to see what the state of the books are, because I said we can't take it for granted. I mean, Joel's entitled to his own opinions, Tim, but he's not entitled to his own facts. And the truth is, you don't have a revenue problem, you have a spending problem. In fact, revenue is $80 billion today higher than in the last year of the Howard government. In fact, spending...
The economy is 22% larger,
well, spending is
Josh.
Well, I'll give you another
fact.
It is. I'll give you another fact. Spending as a proportion of GDP has been higher in every year of this government than it was in the last year.
It's lower as a percentage of GDP than it was under John Howard.
No, it's not right.
Well, the spending numbers at the end of the Howard government, depending on how you look at them, were pretty rich, I think.
Well, we delivered budget surpluses, we put in place infrastructure, and at the end of the day, we were responsible economic managers.
A mixed picture, I think, we can conclude.
Let me just give you three facts to tell you why it's not. Because we produced 22% increase in real wages. We had the lowest inflation and unemployment in 3 decades, and we paid back $96 billion of debt and let $70 billion.
So you had the lowest what, Josh?
We had the lowest inflation and unemployment in 3 decades.
Is that right? You might just want to check that.
Well, I'm happy to check it. But those three facts tell the story. Those three facts tell the story.
I'd like to touch on a couple of specifics, if we can. One is the emotion of the Prime Minister a short time ago on the House with National Disability Insurance. No doubt both of you feel emotion in this topic. We all do to some extent. How do you feel about National Disability Insurance, and how should your party approach the possibility of being part of a decade-long plan to get it done?
Well, the NDIS, and I've always said this, is an important and needed national reform. It receives bipartisan support. I mean, just the other week, Tony Abbott was riding around Australia, visiting small communities, raising money for Carers Australia to help people who actually can't help themselves. So I think we've got a levy now, but where we're going to find the rest of the money that the Productivity Commission has said that is needed. We'll only find that if we can get the budget back into the black, so we can actually spend some of that money that's needed. So I'm a big supporter of the NDIS. My party's a big supporter. I congratulate the government on advocating for it too, and I think it's much needed.
Joel, do you share some of the Prime Minister's emotion on the disability insurance question? Having discussed this inside Labor, what sense do you have of that, and how important is it to have bipartisanship going forward?
Yeah. Well, I think all members of Parliament, regardless of their political persuasion, Tim, do share that emotion. Every member of Parliament would have at some point come across a family struggling under the weight of caring for a disabled child, visited a school with disabled kids. It's very confronting and very distressing when you realise that the system as it is doesn't give you the tools you need to address some of their challenges. And it's not surprising she was emotional today. I mean, we all find that very emotional.
I'd like to touch on one other question before we finish. Unemployment benefits. Labor... it's not that Labor did nothing last night, but the unemployment benefits were... New Start was not raised, and Doug Cameron, as we'll see in a second, has been pretty bluntly critical of his own party for not raising it. What do you say to Doug Cameron about... and to those on New Start?
Yeah. Well, I'll first of all say Doug is driven by his very strong beliefs in this area and has had a consistent position for some time, but so have I. We've still got a very, very strong labour market, and my view has always been that you don't tackle the long-term unemployed, stubborn unemployment successfully by promising to pay them more. I think there are other ways to invest. We should be investing even more heavily in finding pathways to work for those people rather than simply topping up unemployment benefits.
There's an element of cruel to be kind in what you're saying there, isn't there?
Well, they're your terms, but I think that there's no greater disadvantage than not having a job. The dignity that goes with work, the ability to be self-sufficient that goes with work, the capacity to to marry and raise a family. And we do no service or justice to people by encouraging them to continue to do what they are doing now. If they need a special leg up, let's invest in that leg up. I think just across the board increases in unemployment benefits is the lazy policy approach.
$38 a day is right.
Well, I'm not going to get into how much is right and how much is wrong. What I'm saying is we need a safety net while we make every effort to give these people the skills and the tools necessary to get themselves into the labour market.
Josh Frydenberg, do you agree? Don't add to New Start, add to the investment to try and tackle the unemployment problem instead?
Well, I agree with Joel that we've got to get more people back into the workforce, and what's just concerning about this budget is actually projecting lower economic growth and higher unemployment. So I would say, I'd say to the government, don't cut work for the dole as you have done. Don't cut money out of universities and skills as you have done. Got to get people into the workforce, got to develop personal responsibility. At the same time, Tim, to your point, you've got to help the people who need that help, and you've got to find the right balance.
Joel Fitzgibbon, Joshua Frydenberg, very grateful for you coming into Breaking Politics in our post-budget edition. Nice to see you both.